So I'm delighted, if I can add her, to welcome Francesca, who is our resident children's psychologist, and I'm going to add her slides, and she's going to talk to us more about how we can combat those worries.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you everyone for joining and sticking around tonight. It's been so interesting hearing from all of the other professionals, and for me it just really highlights how a kind of holistic, multi-professional approach to allergy is just so important. So just to introduce myself, my name's Francesca and I'm a clinical psychologist. I work almost full time in the NHS, 4.5 days for the NHS, and I work at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. So to become a clinical psychologist back in 2007, I started my undergraduate degree in psychology. And after different years' experience, I then started my doctorate in clinical psychology and qualified as a clinical psychologist in 2016. I've had quite a varied career and done lots of different bits, but I started primarily working with children and teenager in generic mental health services. And as I've gone through my career, I've become more specialist in working in paediatrics, so more hospital-based psychology and children with health conditions, thinking about the impact that medical conditions can have on child development and on child mental health and on the wider family in general, thinking about adjustment to diagnosis, and making sure that those living with health conditions have the right support, and the psychological impact on the whole family. And how I got interested in allergy was that I was the lead psychologist at the Evelina Children's Allergy Service for 18 months before I moved to Great Ormond Street. So psychological impact of allergies. I'm sure you'll be all aware of this, but I don't necessarily think that the psychological part of allergies often gets as much recognition, especially not in services as far as I am concerned. But the constant vigilance of having to avoid potential allergens, along with the unpredictable nature of having reactions, of course, this is going to have a huge impact on anxiety, quality of life, and depression. And the studies that we have, there's not as much as perhaps other areas of allergy, but the studies that have been done are showing this time and time again, that it's having a huge impact on anxiety and quality of life. And we know, especially with food allergy, food is such a fundamental part of social life, parties, of religious gatherings, of school trips, and the impact that that can subsequently have on social development and social opportunities. If there's fear there or anxiety there, is going to have a huge psychological impact. There's also some emerging evidence, so evidence starting to come through, that also if a child has allergies, there's an increase of risk of PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, in both the children but also the parents of children living with allergies, which is obviously concerning for me as a psychologist, and I want to kind of do something about that. We know that quality of life can be worse if you have other comorbidities such as asthma or eczema, and the quality of life of parents is also reduced, particularly in mothers who are reporting higher levels of stress and anxiety in kind of managing their child's allergy. So I just wanted to say a little bit about the context for allergy psychology, because as I said, I think it is a little bit missing, or certainly not as dominant within support for allergy. So there's actually only a few specialist psychology services for allergy in the UK, one of them being at the Evelina where I worked, another one at Southampton. So it is really location that's going to get you access to this specialist psychology, allergy support. Other hospitals do have general paediatric psychology, so that more general psychology across the hospital, and they can provide some support, but this is limited. And often I did a bit of a scoping exercise, and that can be anything from a couple of days input to just half a day. So when we're actually looking putting that down into actual sessions, it's really limited what it can offer, and it's obviously hospital dependent. You might be able to get some psychological support from CAMS, so from Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. But for those that might be following the news at the moment, there's an incredibly long waiting list at CAMS, and it may be that children don't meet a threshold, or that allergy in some cases might exclude them from services. And we also know that often clinicians might lack some of the confidence working with allergy, because it's not a huge dominant part of the training, and it's such a niche area. It's not kind of caught up with the rest of psychology. And I don't say any of this to kind of damn the NHS. I'm a huge advocate for the NHS. I work there full time, but this is the context as it is. I'm kind of passionate about changing. So yeah, moving on to my passion. Kind of my goal really for being here is, as everybody has said this evening, following in soup, having worked with so many families of children with allergies, I really do believe that children with allergies can have a happy, sociable and independent life, and one where their allergies are part of them but not dominated by the allergies. So it's like we're living alongside the allergy, and it's there as part of us but not completely dominating all of life. We know that the beliefs that children hold about their allergies, the stories they tell themselves about their ability to cope, about how they manage their allergy, they start in childhood. So the sooner we can get in there and kind of help sculpt those narratives and those stories, the better. So therefore, my key ingredients are having healthy and helpful conversations from an early age, in combination with kind of balanced and realistic thinking, in combinations with having strategies for managing any tricky feelings that might come up. And in combination with parental modelling of this, we're going to increase the likelihood of a child having improved confidence and improved quality of life going forward into adolescence and adulthood. So just a little bit on anxiety. So probably a lot of people already know this, but anxiety is a reaction or a response that our body has, which is essentially giving us a message that we are in threat or danger. So I always like to describe it. It's like the fire alarm in our head that goes off, warning us that there's a danger there, there's a fire there that we need to do something about. So when anxiety works well, it's actually really functional. But the problem is that alarm can become a bit faulty or a little bit sensitive, and it goes off too much when we're not under threat or not in the danger that our body thinks that we're in. And when we feel anxious, we look to do things, or we do things in our behavior which we think are lowering that threat and therefore reduce that anxiety so that we feel safer. However, often the behaviors that we do, unfortunately, are reinforcing and maintaining the anxiety. So, for example, if little one was playing in soft play and they came out and had kind of reaction, we might get anxious, and the behavior that we might do to reduce that anxiety and make us feel safe is to just avoid going to soft play. But what in that avoidance, what we're doing is we're not learning that actually maybe that was a one-off, or that there is other things that we can do for that child to be safe. And then what actually can happen, and I've seen this happen so often in my practice, is that avoidance might lead to avoidance of other things, avoidance going out at all, avoidance going to play groups, avoidance going to other things. So it can actually longer term perpetuate it. So we need to kind of find other ways of not letting our anxiety of situations win. So obviously the big thing with allergy is that there is a threat, there is a danger. But as I said before, what we need to try and do is actually work out kind of realistically the danger that we're actually in, because most of the time your child is safe, and it's kind of that alarm, keeping a watchful lookout, being vigilant, having a watchful eye over what's going on, but not fully sounding. We need that to sound at, if and when it happens, the serious reactions, but we don't want it going off all of the time. So to do that, we need to find ways of soothing our threat system and acting in calmer ways which aren't perpetuating this idea that we're in danger all of the time, because we're not. And finding alternative ways of responding to and thinking about situations which are naturally going to go against this instinct, which are naturally going to go against this mechanism that is anxiety, that's kind of naturally there to keep us safe and out of danger. And often that might involve gradually building up the confidence through something called graded exposure to situations which might cause anxiety. We do that in tiny, tiny little steps. We might make a list of all of the different situations that make us anxious. We might grade those. We might break those down into tiny bits and do the smallest steps and just repeating that over and over again, working up to build confidence. And I'm going to talk more about that in the course as to how we can do that. I should have also said that other behaviours that I often see in clinics in terms of behaviours that we might do to make ourselves feel safe might include checking. Obviously, it's really important to check food packets, even do that second check. But if we're getting, 10, 11, 12 times, that then becomes unhelpful. And we actually know that repeated checking can make us more unsure and there can perpetuate anxiety further. And control, this is another thing that I see a lot, is trying to control everything. And a question I often ask, and I'd encourage you to ask yourself tonight, is what would 100% safety look like? Because there's very few things, if at all, that we can do in life that we can guarantee 100% safety. There's usually some level of risk. That might be tiny, like 0.1%, but there's very few things that we can do with 100% safety. At the other end of the spectrum, we've obviously got very risky behaviours, very impulsive behaviours, which I'm obviously not encouraging. But somewhere along this line, much closer to the 100% safety end of the spectrum, is the position we're trying to get to, is what is safe enough? How can I be confident that I've done all that I can to the best of my resource, to the best of my ability, and have confidence that that is enough? Because in the attempt to get 100% safety, we get such levels of control that are not healthy and that are going to perpetuate the anxiety. So one way that I help people to think about this is think about the world and what's within our immediate environment. So out there are so many different risks, so many different allergens, so many different people, and we do not have control of those people. And we might want to do everything that we can to keep all of that stuff within our control, but we can't. And again, that attempt to do that can often just perpetuate anxiety. So instead, what we need to focus on is what's in my immediate vicinity, what's on the table in front of me, what's around my child right now. We've got a much better chance of focusing our control onto that to lead us to this safe enough position. So the allergy help course. I mean, there's so much I could say, but I'm just so glad that Dr. Helen's invited me to kind of have a module on it so that we can start sharing more information about supporting psychological well-being of you and your children. So what I'm going to aim to cover in the course is to address further some of the psychological impact of living with allergies. And I aim, like everybody that's spoken tonight, to empower you to take some control over the psychological well-being of both yourself and your children. For parents and carers particularly, I want to explore ways of managing your fears and your worries as a parent. And helping you understand in more detail about some of the helpful but also unhelpful function that anxiety in our threat system can have, and help find your position, because it will be unique to everybody, about moving to that safe enough position. And often that's kind of guiding you through a series of questions to kind of work out where that is for you. And that might change as you kind of go along your allergy journey with your child. I'm going to give you some practical tips and strategies for managing your own anxiety and thinking about how you can have some of these more helpful conversations at home, which are going to ultimately change the narratives around allergy at home and change that story that your child's going to have about themselves and their allergy. In terms of supporting children, I want to help you support your children to manage their worries. And part of that will be helping to notice anxiety in your child, because it can present again in various different ways, and finding ways to help your child name emotions and talk about worries in a really curious and calm way. I'm also going to talk a bit about differentiating between anxiety and allergic symptoms, because there's actually a huge crossover, and lots of the symptoms of anxiety can actually mimic the symptoms that we can have when we're having an allergic reaction, but there's very key differences. So I'm going to help you unpick those, which is really vital, because we obviously need to know when to act for allergic reactions, but not perpetuate anxiety in children. So I just put a slide there to show my Instagram.